Good evening. Thank you for joining us for this special program. Tonight, we're excited to hear from Merrill Atwater. Not only is he the CEO of People to People International, but Merrill is also President Eisenhower's great-grandson. Tonight, we will learn more specifically about People to People International. And our next Lunch and Learn program is in a couple of weeks. We'll look at Sister Cities International and its relationship with this organization. Without further ado, Merrill, would you like to tell us a little bit about your background and go ahead and jump right into your presentation?
You got it. So People to People International is a 501c3 that is actually in Kansas City, Missouri. More importantly is that Sister Cities actually used to be a part of People to People International whenever we were in the federal government side of things. We actually started in the federal government, but I'll get into that in my presentation. My personal background is very simple. I'm a business person. I started my own business in my early 20s. Failed a lot, won a lot, ended up doing pretty good. Was the director of aviation for the state of Kansas for a while. And my mother, after 23 years of being CEO of People to People, asked me to come take it over. And I said, you know, that's not really what I want to do. But she convinced me by twisting my arm and beating me up. And how do you say no to your mom? And so ever since that, for the last 4 years, I've been running the organization. It's been very interesting with COVID. As a nonprofit, sector, money kind of has dried up a little bit. But we do a lot of great work around the world. And I'm very excited to share about how we kind of came apart and what we actually do. More importantly is why it's important and why we as individuals and we as people need to understand that if you take nothing away from what I talk about today, I really think that the one thing that you should take away is that at the end of the day, everyone that's on this call, everyone that's around you are just human beings. And it's important for us to understand that, because once you bring in, no offense to the host, but once you start bringing in governments and you start bringing in agendas and other things, the art of peace starts failing. Victors of wars make boundaries and borders, while culture transitions all throughout the world. And I'll start with that. In order to understand People to People International, I have to go through a brief history, and I will bore some of the people on this because you probably know a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about. But President Eisenhower, my great-grandfather, was an interesting gentleman. Not from the point of being a common person that ended up doing extraordinary things, but just being from a small town in Kansas and coming up basically in a path that projected him into the position he was to change the world in the face of humanity itself. But Abilene, Kansas, for most of you that don't know, if I ever give a conversation or do a talk about the interstate system, I always say that Abilene, Kansas is the only place in the whole entire country that has 5,000 people or less at the time, and ended up getting a turnoff. Abilene, Kansas is small. If you blink, you can go through the whole entire place. But it is a charming, wonderful town, and it is where my great-grandfather is from. He's from, growing up, if you will, he was from the quote-unquote wrong side of the tracks, meaning that he was dirt poor and undesirable. Different places around town look at the Eisenhowers like they were just different people, run-of-the-mill people. But more importantly is that they worked hard. And this is something that was learned by Ida and David. But the idea of work ethic turned into something that was created. My great-great-grandmother, Ida, actually ended up going to college, and she's one of the first people to go to college as a woman in Kansas that I know of. It's pretty interesting whenever you start going through the history of the family, but nonetheless, education was something that was bestowed upon them. And in turn, Ike ended up going to West Point. He graduated middle of his class. He wasn't a great student. He wasn't a terrible student, but he wasn't a great student. But he was different. His thought process was more of strategy versus progressions like some of the other people that fell in his class. But the motivation for him himself was to get the job done, and understanding the interpersonal communications, the interpersonal relationships with different people was how he had things done. He learned that at a very early age. I believe that when he was teaching, football at different places, different forts before World War II, I think that's something that he really shined at, is learning the strategy, understanding, looking at different areas. He learned how to play poker at a very young age. I think all of these things play a major role in his thought process. And whenever you think about a strategic way of thinking, you have to think of all the outs, you have to think about all the movement, and you have to think about how people are planning things. But you have to also understand the people that are around you and their tendencies and their tells. And what I mean by that is whenever you have egos like Bradley, Montgomery, and Patton all sitting around a table and you're trying to direct them so that everybody can get something done without having to have all the credit, it becomes a very difficult and strenuous task. And this is why he was chosen to be the Supreme Allied Commander, in my opinion, because when the war started in 1939, he was a colonel. And by the time, 1944 came around, he got his 5th star, which is a very, very, very fast promotion rate. But World War II is the fundamental reason why People to People International exists. Seeing the worst of humanity and understanding what we actually dealt with the Holocaust, for example, the mass genocides of millions of people, is something that really is hard to explain and see. Being able to liberate concentration camps, seeing those things, is where we start seeing the worst of humanity. Seeing Europe and fascist dictators bombing and destroying whole cities to 90, 92% and 98% destroyed, like this is Warsaw. And I've stood right there in that square, by the way. And it's something incredible to see the rebuild. But seeing that, he believed that we as individuals could do something better. He wasn't once he left the military, he wasn't someone that was seeking to be president of the United States. In fact, I don't even think he even liked politics all that much. I know in 1948, Truman asked him to run for president, and he would take vice president, but he decided not to do that. So Truman recalled him back into the Army, and he became the first NATO commander, as well as continued to be the president of Columbia University. It's an interesting thing whenever you start thinking about evaluating your life and evaluating what you should do and not do. But Ike always had a way of doing things about leading and serving others. I believe that was actually taught to him by his mother. I think that's something that's taught in places like Abilene, Kansas. I think that you'd be hard-fetched to find people in New York to have the same thought process, where you don't have to get the credit in order to be successful, where you can truly become something special without even really putting yourself in a position to take that lead. But leadership is something that our country always lacks. And whenever we find good ones, it's unusual and remarkable. And in this particular case, I believe that my great-grandfather was one of the very best presidents in the history of the world. And the reason why is because he's the first president to start the civil rights legislation. He was the first president to pass it in 96 years since Reconstruction. He started the interstate system, first president to finish the interstate system, that the last piece of legislation that ended in 1994. He was the first president to start NASA, the FAA, and then the domestic policies and everything that he put in place allowed for him to have a balanced budget while bringing the United States from basically back from our isolation side after World War I back into where we were as humanitarian, building and working with other countries to be great in defending democracy and freedom. And that's what he did as president. He was the first president to recognize that a world with non-nuclear proliferation would be better than having nuclear weapons on every corner. His speech, Atoms for Peace, was one of the most remarkable pieces of literature to read and also see done and delivered in my lifetime. And that was way before my lifetime, but that I've seen in my lifetime in recent modern history. Asking people to give up their weapons in order to make peace is something that most people don't even understand or can comprehend, for that matter. But that's why in 1956, he decided that the government, being stagnant and not able to do things, because governments have agendas, people have agendas, but governments are the ones that put those agendas in place. He believed that we ourselves as individuals could do great things. He believed that it's up to us to ask for peace. In fact, I believe my favorite quote of his ever is that I believe that the people one day will want peace so badly that governments will have to get out of their way and give it to them. Meaning that he understood the military-industrial complex. It's something that he's famous for, but more importantly is he understood that you and I are the ones that make a difference in the world, not government. With that being said, he did expand the federal government, but also he acted fiscally responsible, having a balanced budget, last president to operate in the black. In fact, getting rid of the debt from World War II, but also creating the interstate system, which is something that's unique and remarkable. But People to People International was an ultimate dream of his, in my opinion. Whenever you see the worst of humanity, coming back and seeing the best of humanity, bringing people together in order to build a world that's better for the future is something that we lack today. We forget about these things. But as most things that are good in government, he believed that the government is not responsible enough to handle the process of peace. And so he asked all the people on the left side of your screen for help getting it, into the private sector. Walt Disney actually was a good friend of his at the time. Said that he would have nothing to do with it because he believed that People to People International was propaganda, and he didn't want anything to do with it. So I don't know the exact date, but I do know sometime in 1960, he talked to a gentleman named J.C. Hall, the founder of Hallmark Cards, who you see on the right-hand side of your screen. And he said, hey, I'm getting turned down by people like Walt Disney, by the Hiltons, by all these people that have always, worked with me and all this stuff to bring people to people into the private sector. And I need funding for it. And I didn't come from, he wasn't a Kennedy. It didn't come from money. It didn't come from all these other things. He wasn't a Rockefeller. He wasn't a Taft. So he turned around and JC said, I'll do it, but I don't fund anything outside of Kansas City. So ever since that day, we've been an NGO nonprofit in the private sector in 1961, where we moved to Kansas City, Missouri, and we've been there ever since. Why is that important? Because what this does is this is the first time we see the federal government, People to People, being established as a peace organization. Now, what we do see nowadays is things like Peace Corps, and you can name a few others, I'm sure. But People to People International was people meeting people. People to People, the program itself is still a State Department program, by the way. If you go overseas, you are part of the People to People program. If you travel overseas, you are part of the State Department's People to People program. There are official memos being written right now that talk about people to people. Why is that important? Because that is actually who we are. That's what we were. And I mentioned sister cities earlier. Well, they were actually the civic side of what we are doing currently. It took them a little bit longer to get out into the private side, but eventually they did. Sister Cities actually receives about $500,000 a year in federal funding, and People to People receives $0 in federal funding. So something very different between the two. But we are a nonpartisan 501c3 world peace humanitarian organization. We believe taking someone and putting them in a place that they're culturally different can make an impact on who they are and make a difference to the world, and understanding that culture, although maybe a little different, they may look different, they may be a different color, maybe a different religion, But knowing that the basic needs of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you will, need to be met, food, water, shelter, and then we can talk about the other things. Once those are met, we start splitting our different ways. But, for the basic parts, humans are humans. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that I've been in places where I've been extremely uncomfortable and cultures that I didn't fully understand. I've eaten things that no one in the world should ever eat, in my opinion, but it's something that's a common item in those countries that I'm in. A good example would be oxtail. That's not something I prefer to eat, but I've been in places where they've given me a protein like oxtail that is remarkable because they have nothing to give. And that tells you everything you need to know about humanity, because human beings are simple. Human beings are good in general. It's whenever you build upon those basic fundamentals and get into complex issues like who's right that things become very difficult. This picture right here is actually us going into West Berlin in 1962, where they made us burn our documentations and papers so that we would not spread democracy into that organization or into that area, occupied area. But People to People itself has continued down that tradition. We do cultural exchange, global education, and humanitarian work in over 160 countries around the world. We have over 350 chapters. We have over 100,000 members. I think that's coming up in a second. And it's just absolutely remarkable how much work we do with this very little money that we have. This picture right here, I actually took it. This is Sister Teresa. She's in Cuba. I was in Cuba with her, donating school supplies, basic things like Tylenol, basic things like ace bandages and Band-Aids, things that cost extreme amount of money. A bottle of Tylenol in Cuba will cost about $18. Here it costs us $2. Something that I can't explain to you. You have to go see yourself. But Sister Teresa and I had coffee for about an hour and a half talking about absolutely nothing because we didn't speak the same language. My Spanish is broken at best, and her English is non-existent. But we did have coffee and enjoy each other's company based on a mutual respect and understanding. That's one example of a Cuban person that I realized very soon after being there, that the people of Cuba are just like us. They love laughter. They love family. They believe that we should work together in creating opportunities. A lot of people in Cuba are entrepreneurs. Really remarkable when you start thinking about that. Because we're always taught that you can't make a difference, but you can. This is a global youth forum from a year ago, or 2 years ago at this time, where we're working in the inner city of Kansas City, Missouri, working and creating different projects and providing supplies to kids that wouldn't have it otherwise. This is us in Uganda, where we're celebrating the handicap side of everyone and making sure that we're celebrating Winter's Day and water. These are all things that are very unique for different cultures and areas, because we think of water as a basic everyday right, but most people around the world have to walk to get water, and especially clean water, or they have to develop different ways of creating those opportunities. Our programs do a lot of different goods. We do things like homestays, provide scholarships, grants. We work with school and classrooms to do global education and cultural competency. We have a book club, believe it or not, where we have, I think right now, 13 countries represented in those, and about 100 people working together reading books. And this time, I think it's about surviving Antarctica. Interesting topic, but not necessarily something that I know anything about, I guess. But the Global Youth Forum plays a major role, where we have students from all over the world come together and talk about their cultural perspectives and understanding of who they are. But the humanitarian projects is my favorite part, because it really is where we make the biggest difference. We provide schools and education. We build these schools sometimes, create different pockets of good places where they would never be able to have something. Sometimes it's as simple as providing a school uniform for them. Now, why is all this important? And Why is it? Oh, let me finish this part. Other things that we do is we do chapter development, helping them fundraise for the different projects that they have. We work with grant assistance program. We actually do marketing and advertising with them, and we do membership promotion. This is the amount of members. We have about 100,000 members throughout the world. We do business in 160 countries. I have to maintain all those trademarks, by the way. Don, you think you have it bad? I'm telling you, that's pretty difficult to do. But most importantly, is that we do try every single day to make a difference in the world in order to create a different generation and create the next generation more tolerant than the previous one. So basically, since 1956, we've been creating tolerance and understanding, something that seems to be in the last 10 years, something that needs to be talked about more. This is the vision of my great-grandfather. Right in the middle of that picture, I think I'm at the very end there. Look at that handsome devil, there I am. But that is one of the last survivors of Dachau. That's a camp that my great-grandfather liberated with his troops. Why is this important? Because the simple basic things are that we have throughout the years seen the absolute worst of humanity. We don't learn from the historical problems that we've had, the historical trials and tribulations of things like the Holocaust, and we repeat them in places like Rwanda. And because someone might look different, have a different culture, we forget the simplicity is that we are simply human beings, and we have an opportunity to make a difference. Really, when you start thinking about it, it can be as simple as this. Every day you have a choice. Every day you have an opportunity that you yourself can make a difference in the world. Every day you can choose to or choose not to. But could you imagine that if every single person in the world, or 6 billion plus people that we have in the world, chose for 10 days straight to do something good for somebody else, what that would do to the world? Could you imagine if they did it to 100 people, or 100 days, excuse me, straight? I think the world would end up being a better place, and we ourselves would end up doing great things. The vision of my great-grandfather was very simple. From someone that came from a farming community in the middle of nowhere and coming to where we are today, is something that's not only remarkable, but his legacy isn't as simple as he was a great general. His legacy isn't as simple as that he was a great president. His legacy is very simple. His legacy is that he wanted to bring you and I together so that we could create a world in a better place. And that's something that's not talked about enough. Asking the world to put down nuclear arms in order to create peace. It wasn't a policy like Reagan's peace through strength. It was a policy that every time we build a bullet, every time we build a warship, every time we make a nuclear weapon, it is essentially a theft out of the mouths of the poor and the hungry, that we can make the true difference together. People to People International is that legacy organization that continues to do that. That's how we have formed, and that's how we've done things. The interpersonal side of things, just like in World War II, whenever he created an atmosphere and environment for us to work together with a multitude of countries that some didn't even speak the same language, but we were able to work together, creating an environment where we were victorious in that time. Seeing the things that he saw created an environment for him to be successful, and a legacy that we don't even fully understand today. With that being said, I did not realize I would get through that as fast as I did. I would like to open up to questions and discussion, if that's okay with everybody.
You can type your questions in the chat, or if you'd like, you can unmute yourself and ask.
Absolutely. And I can keep talking, Don, if you want me to. I can talk all day.
Let's see what kind of questions we have. I want to tell you, Merrill, that this was an incredibly moving speech talked for me. I never really thought about people to people from the point of view that you gave it, and I want to thank you for that. I want to ask you, what was, I'm going to ask a trite question, and I don't mean it to be trite. When you've gone on these trips, what has been the most meaningful one to you, and why did it speak to you?
I can't say it like that. Let me say it in a different way. There's not one that's meaningful or not meaningful. For me, travel is something that I've done before. I've done international business a lot. But the first time I saw poverty, real poverty, not United States poverty, true and unconditional poverty, where you can't get food and you can't see the things that we have today. In this country, we are blessed. We are very, very, very wealthy. Our poor in this country have an opportunity to go get food somewhere. Our poor in our country have an opportunity to have shelter over their head. Now, not all of them take it. We can't fix that part, but there is opportunities and programs out there to fix that. Whenever you walk through the streets of Town Uno in Mexico, that aren't paved and that they have three-sided shacks and a dirt floor, and they give you protein to eat for the first time of your life, whenever you know for a fact that they're not going to get that chicken back, that is the part that breaks your heart and also humbles you. Because I sit here and worry about paying my water bill sometimes, and some people have to walks, 6 kilometers, which is about 1.5 miles, to go get water that they may or may not be able to drink without boiling it first. So in that sense, those types of trips really remind me how great it is to be in this country and how blessed we are. We, in my opinion, and it doesn't matter who you are, if you're in this country, you've won the lottery. You have an opportunity to make a difference. So it might be harder for some people, might not be, but you do have an idea of what you can do, and the mutual respect that happens and that can happen once you meet people and see people is really truly the difference, in my opinion, Don.
All right, Merrill, we have a question in the comments or in the chat. It says, what are the ways a non-student mature individual can be engaged in the organization and mission, even beyond donations?
Well, I absolutely love that. Number one, start a chapter. It's very simple. We keep it super duper easy. We're not the government, so we don't have to have 16,000 boxes of red tape. And that's not a dig on you, Don. I promise it's not, okay? I promise. All you have to do, it's really, really simple. Start a chapter. I say chapter because just like Rotary, we have regular meetings. So what we ask you to do is meet once a quarter at a minimum. You need to have 10 members, a president, and you need to have identified some humanitarian projects that you can work on. Once that's done, you can submit your project to us and we give you chapter grants if you need money. If not, obviously, we don't want to do that if we don't have to, because we like to save our money for people that can do that. That's number one. Number two, believe it or not, you're already participating in it. You may not know it, but as a human being, you're part of the human race. And therefore, if you are talking about tolerance and understanding towards other people and you're treating people with respect and dignity every single day, you are already being a people-to-people ambassador as far as I'm concerned. It's about you and I working together and making the world a better place. Of course, our membership side as well. So we have at-large members if you can't have a chapter, but there we are encouraging you to work with us in order to identify projects in order to try to make your own community better. Let me explain that part real fast, because this is something that I often, probably too often, skip over. Number one, humanitarian projects can be as simple as going out and picking up trash on the side of the highway, as far as I'm concerned. If that's what your community needs, that's the number one need in your community, or something that you can do to make a difference, that counts. But we have people in student chapters that go and do that. They adopt a highway and they go and work through things and they go and do that stuff. But then the second thing is that we have chapters that do HIV awareness and different types of camps for women that are at risk of catching HIV because they're prostitutes. I mean, it's that diverse. We have other chapters that, in Korea, for example, they support the military base there, and they homestay soldiers that come over from NATO. That's a remarkable thing. And then another chapter of ours put a sewing class together in order to teach people how to be seamstress so they can make a different type of living than being poor. So all those things make a difference. And then finally, the last thing is you can travel with us. Travel with us, please, because any money that we make that's extra goes directly back into chapter grants, number one. Number two, you get to live the same mission that my great-grandfather went on the first mission to Mexico City with Walt Disney, with my grandfather, with my grandmother in Mexico City. And that's actually where It's a Small World was created, believe it or not. So I think that's kind of one of those fun, interesting facts. I'm quoting my mother on that, by the way. So you can bet that's probably right. Is there any other questions?
Don wanted you to ask, what is your membership system?
So it's pretty simple. Local chapters. We have lots of local chapters throughout the United States. Create a chapter, please. You have 10 friends that you like to hang out with and do things with. Do it. I mean, it's that simple. So you can have that, and then we have at-large members as well. Those are the two big things that we have. Some of the things that we do that I didn't cover is that we have a worldwide conference, for example, this year. We have it every other year. This year it's going to be in South Korea. So I'm actually headed to South Korea in October. I'm looking forward to that. The South Koreans are a very, very, very fun group of people. They love their karaoke. That is a stereotype that is 100% true. I've been on stage with them. I'm a terrible singer. They laugh at me the whole time. And I laugh right back at them because I don't care. I can't speak Korean, but I can sing, some John Denver like nobody's business. Out of tune, granted, but they love it. And that's what matters. It's about putting yourself out there and making those types of difference. Another thing that we do is that our travelers always have some kind of discount and working with us. So if you're a member, you get a membership discount with our travel, which means that we try to give it to you as close to cost because we are a nonprofit. We're not here to make money. We want to just support our people who don't money. We have chapters in the Republic of the Congo. I mean, they don't have two sticks to rub together. We have chapters in Tanzania. Once again, no way to do it. Ghana, Togo, just to name a few. We have chapters in South America that don't have any money as well, but they want to make a difference in their community, and we work with them to try to raise that money and do that. So the benefit is that you can adopt a chapter and work with them yourselves. We have a great chapter in Delaware that does that, and they've adopted the Togo chapter and has built 2 schools and paid for tuition for 35 kids for the last 2 years themselves, giving them a chance to get out of poverty, which is incredible. That's an incredible thing to talk about. Sorry, I get on tangents. Dawn knows that. She's plugging away. She knows exactly what to say.
Do you guys go back and survey your participants after they've had these experiences? And if so, what do they say as far as like the impact of these experiences on them?
So we don't. So all right. So our travel program is for adults, especially, is a little bit different. We don't. We don't go and stay in huts or anything like that. And I mean that with the utmost respect, because if that's what you have, that's what you have. We do travel and go and stay in nice hotels, but at the same time, we go in and we give back on these trips. And what I find is that most of the time, people's biggest complaint is food. Because they don't understand and like some of the food that's on these trips. But there's not McDonald's in all the places we go. I'm sorry, guys. I mean, that's just how it is. Sometimes you're eating in the middle of a minefield and there's only some kind of soup that's there that looks like muddy water. I mean, that is what it is. But that's the humanitarian side. But the other side of it is that we have to understand the cultures that we're in. So when we go to different places, we will go to places like the Louvre, and we will go to the beaches of Normandy, and we'll go to talk to Parliament, and we'll go to and meet with the King of Jordan, and we'll go down and meet with the President of Egypt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we do that side too. because it's just as important for you to understand that side of the government and that side of the way that their country works as it is to understand the poor side. So I can go both ways and tell you about both sides, but the most important thing, the biggest thing that I always get the best feedback on is that every single person that I've ever talked to about any of this, Survey Monkeys, all of this, is that they always take away more than what they've given. What I mean by that is they may go and donate $1,000 to an orphanage that they go and visit, but they get 20,000 times more back because they actually understand, right? And that's something that I can't describe to you. You have to feel that and see it for yourself. But for me personally, I've been to dozens and dozens of countries. I've been to Antarctica. That's why I made that joke, by the way. I know it wasn't funny to anybody but me. I get that. I do that a lot for myself. But it's one of those things where you know, it's an incredible thing to realize for the first time that you actually changed someone's life just by showing up. That's something that I can't describe to you. You have to see it. Hopefully that answers that question pretty good.
I think it does. Don asks, do you work with sister cities at all anymore?
Oh, all the time. What I mean by that is I don't do anything at all with them except for they ask me to come speak all the time. You know, and I do, because Sister Cities is an Eisenhower legacy organization, and it's extremely important. What they do, for people that don't know, is that they work with cities themselves directly and partner with other cities that they find maybe they have a large population of those types of people there. So, for example, if you're in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, you might be directly related to someone in Germany. You know, Abilene, I don't know what Abilene's sister cities are, but I'm sure there's probably 3 or 4. And they work back and forth. Oh, Japan? You just picked a country, not even a city, just Japan. You know, that seems like Abilene to me. But Japan is a great culture. I mean, I was there not too long ago. I had the very best food I've ever had in my whole entire life and the very worst food I've ever had in my whole entire life, all on the same day. It was fantastic. But what it does to me is it brings the business people together that we some of, but whenever you can bring that side to it, so you bring the cultural side and you bring the business side together, and all of a sudden the government is irrelevant, right? It's one of those things that it doesn't matter. No longer does it make a large impact.
All right. Well, I'm not sure if we have any other questions. I will give people on the phone the opportunity to unmute. I see there are a few people, 1 or 2 people on the phone, and ask a question if you have one.
Well, I'm going to say one more thing. We obviously, I can tell you this without any hesitation. I would love to have everybody involved with us in any way that you feel that's appropriate for you. In today's world, having people to people is probably more important than it ever has been. We have hypertension between different countries. I will not name them because I do not get into politics on these. If you call me on my cell phone, we can talk about it all day long. That's not a problem, especially if I take off the shirt. You know, I have no problem talking about it. But, you know, in this situation, I would never do that. But a lot of it is misunderstanding of culture and cultural attitudes. Where we are in our country, I can be in Kansas City where I am right now, and I can look across the river and I can see 15 different cultures that are sitting right in front of me. You have people that are poor, you have people that are rich. That's one cult. Those are 2 different cultures completely. But then you start adding in things that we hyphenate ourselves with. So we're Americans, but we're some kind of hyphenated American, right? Or we're a Republican or a hyphenated Republican, or we're a Democrat or whatever we're hyphenated with. But we forget the simplicity is that if we work together, we can build greater things than if we work differently. And so, you know, it's important to do that. So if you don't get involved with us, I always encourage everybody, no matter what your age is, to get involved with something that you can try to make a difference with, especially if you're learning about yourself, because anytime you give, you receive back tenfold. I promise that.
All right. We have a hand up. Do you want to go ahead? Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it very much. Merrill, I have a personal type question and a follow-up. Was
Sure.
your mother the president's daughter?
Granddaughter.
Your mother was, so he's your great-grandfather.
He is. He's my great-grandfather. I'm actually the fourth Eisenhower to run this organization, which sounds weird whenever you say it out loud.
Okay. How big is the question about people, how big is your organization people-wise, not only members, but staffing-wise? What kind of staff do you have in Kansas City or Harrisburg or around the world?
So in Kansas City, that's where we are, and we have no staff outside of Kansas City. So that would be a very good question. So I actually only have a payroll of about $250,000, and I have about 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 employees total.
Full-time employees.
7 full-time employees.
Okay.
Yep. We've breaking it down. So our organizational structure goes like this. We have world headquarters, and then on top of world headquarters, below that, we have regions. So we have different regions that have it. We have the European region, we have the Latin American region, we have the Eastern region, and then we have the African region. All those things play a role. And inside those regions themselves, they have country headquarters a lot of the time. So Japan, for example, has its own network of chapters underneath it that fall into the Asian side. Korea, same thing. Korea actually has an executive director, but we don't pay for that. They pay for it themselves. We run a tight ship. My overall budget's less than $800,000 a year. So we keep it very, very low.
Those countries then have their own staff and their own funding.
Some of them do, but they definitely have their own funding. We do help with chapter grants. So in Africa, it's a little bit different than that. In Africa, I cannot describe to you how poor some of the places are that we work in Africa. I mean, we make hand washing stations there for $50, and it changes the whole entire community. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it is that simple, but it is that important as well.
How are you funded then? Just by donations?
Donations, travel, and we do apply for grants, obviously, from places like Hallmark. J.C. Hall organization, the Hallmark Family Foundation, has been a huge support of ours. Actually, I just got a new supporter, trip.com, which is a travel site that now is going to be a yearly donor to us. It makes sense to them because we fit right into their mission parameters. So that's what we do. And then, of course, we build out programs for people. So last year, before the pandemic, we built out the Chickasaw Institute on World Peace. So we built that out for them, and they paid us so much money to do that and work with them. And we make money through our cultural competency, where we go to corporations and talk about diversity and inclusion, which are hot topics right now. We're old hat at this. This is like nothing unusual for us. Just respecting people, start there, and let's move on and talk about different cultures. But we actually have very diverse staff. So we have a little bit of everybody involved. We have old people, young people. We have all different races, all different religions that work with us out of those 7 people. So it's pretty unique working environment.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right, Don put a quote in the chat. Do you want to tell us about the quote, Don?
So I did what Samantha usually does. I went on our website, looked for quotes. This is not a people-to-people quote. It's from an address to the National Council of Catholic Women, but it really sort of jumped out as to, the broader umbrella of what Eisenhower was all about. And the quote is, "I say with all the earnestness that I can command, that if American mothers will teach our children that there is no end to the fight for better relationships among the people of the world, we shall have peace." So, I mean, that's exactly what he's talking about, Merrill, right? Like, we need to know each other, understand each other, respect each other, and then we can have world peace.
So let's think about it very simple, okay? If all you know is hate, you're going to teach hate. If all you know is love, you're going to teach love. I know that sounds simple and basic, but that really is how simple it is. And another way of thinking about it is if you live in a certain environment and all you see is that environment, you're like a horse with blinders on. If you see, only thing you see is people being kind to each other, you're going to be kind to people, generally speaking. Always exceptions to the rules, but that's a general speaking. If all you see is violence, you're going to be violent. You have to be. You have to adapt to the situation that you're in. So once you take all of that away and you start breaking that down and you take people and you put them into a different area and they can learn the other side of things, you become very tolerant. But at the end of the day, if you can't be respectful, you can't understand that there are different opinions, you can't understand that we can talk about things that are uncomfortable without being angry at each other. If you can't do that, we'll never have peace. Living in fear and living in fear because of ignorance isn't an excuse for stupidity.
It's a very real statement.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do we have any other questions?
Merrill, I'm going to ask you something. We have a handful of our staff on this phone call. When we are talking about people to people, what would you suggest we say? Like if you were teaching us what to say about people to people, what would you suggest we say?
Peace through understanding. I mean, that's our motto that's been going on since 1956. The best way to create an environment, or the best way to create peace is to create an environment of understanding and a free exchange of ideas without penalty or perjury. You're allowed to have different opinions. You're allowed to have a different religion. You're allowed to have a different skin color. It shouldn't matter. The idea that people are wrong just because they look different, act different, talk different is stupid. But if I was asking the staff, your staff, to talk about people to people, I would say that it is the greatest project that Dwight David Eisenhower ever created, mainly because it was the combatants of the Holocaust. It is the opposite of the devastation that he saw during World War II. It's where being from Kansas, we're obviously more tolerant of most people because that's who we are. But more importantly is that whenever you take that down and you see who we are as a people, and then seeing what can be done, people to people is the opposite of what was done, and we're trying to create the can be done of things. We are a living organization that was the brainchild of Dwight David Eisenhower. So that's what I would say if I was saying anything about it. It is, in my opinion, out of all the things that he did, it is the greatest accomplishment that he ever did, because he took all his ideas of what the world could be and tried to put them into one organization.
All right. We have a new question, and then there's a hand up. So the question is, has there ever been any kind of book written about the history of people to people?
There is actually a book written by Dave Nemchek, Ambassador Nemchek. I don't know if it's in print anymore, but there is actually a book. But if you ever have questions or anything like that, I might have a copy of it. You can get in touch with the people at the library. I know I have a copy of it. I have a couple copies. But I'd be happy to send you the copy of the book itself. I've read it about 3 times, especially whenever I took over being CEO. But since then, it's one of those things that it's difficult to find, because people don't think logically. Right, and that's okay. That's why we're here. Typically, people, if you're being honest, and we need to be, if we're going to have a real conversation about things, but typically speaking, people in general are worried about what they're doing in their lives, and that's okay. That we have to be egocentric when it comes to this stuff a lot of the time, because we still have to put food, water, and shelter on our plates before we can try to make a difference in someone else's life, and so that's where we're at. So, but yes, there is a book written. I'd be happy to share that with you.
All right, and then the hand that's up. Yes.
You may, just a few minutes ago, you were talking about communication and understanding. and people that don't look like me, and all of those situations. Since we seem to have a little bit of a problem in this country with those same things, that's a whole other issue, I understand. But because we seem to have a bit of a problem with those same issues, do you do anything at all in this country? Does people to people do anything at all in this country?
So we're very active, but we don't take political stances. So you have to understand that. And people are like, well, what does that mean? That means that I'm not going to be involved in a contest to see if I can be right or not. Because the answer is if you think you're right and I think I'm right, nothing gets accomplished. My thing is that we go out. I speak all over the country. I speak all over the world about this stuff. My favorite thing to do is to talk to someone that thinks that they're right, because then I try to understand why they're right or why they think they're right, and then we have a discussion about what if they're wrong, right? And so a lot of the times that's what it is. But you have to remember, in this country, I think there is a problem with racial relations right now. I'm just going to say it. I know that's uncomfortable for people to say, but there is. I think there's also an over-exaggeration of the same thing, because we've been taught that it's a hyperbolic issue that we can't address because you have no authority on it, let's say, right? Because you're different than me, so you don't have an authority on what I live through. True, maybe it is. But the truth is that if I can't have a discussion with you and learn about your opinion and learn about where your thought process is, learn about your experiences, then there's no way on earth that I can change or I can make the effort to make things different around me. So if I can't have that discussion, then what you've done is you've isolated me, right? And once you isolate me, there's a problem. You then start talking about things like hatred, and you start talking about things like frustration, and then you get tired of it, and then you move on to a different topic because you give up. Whenever we can sit down and create an environment where we can have an open exchange of ideas and see what we can actually fix. The problem with politics, and that's where we're at now, the problem with politics is that once you start passing through emotion through politics and you start putting emotion into things, then you can't actually solve a problem. The emotion side of things needs to be on caring about each other. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter who you are. We have to care about each other first. If we can't care about each other, we can't move past the simple step of moving to the next thing, which is talking about all the problems. So if you can't respect someone as a human being, how can you possibly listen to their ideas? You can't. So this is exactly what we're talking about. This is exactly why People to People was created. This is what we've been working with since 1956, for 65 years, we've been talking about this. So breaking down those stereotypes, breaking down those walls, and creating an environment where we can have a free exchange of ideas without someone taking it personally, almost impossible to do, but I'm telling you, we can do it. I've done it. I've seen it done. I've been in countries where there literally are Jewish people, Islamic people, Christians, all different colors, all sitting down at the table trying to figure out how to solve world problems. If they can do it and they're kids, why can't we do it? Because we have too much ego? Well, you know what? Here's my ego. Let's talk. You can have it. I don't have an ego when it comes to this. If we don't try to fix the problems in this country today and around the world, because in that those things go hand in hand right now, if we don't try to fix it by having simple conversations, it will never get fixed and it will get worse. Simplicity is the answer to most things in life.
And on that note, I think we might wrap it up.
Okay, very good.
So thank you so much, Merrill. I really appreciate you coming on and giving this wonderful presentation. So just to wrap up, tonight's program is sponsored by the Eisenhower Foundation with generous support from the Jeff Coat Foundation. Our upcoming programs on Thursday, August 26th at noon.
Joy, I'm sorry. Samantha really needed to say something.
Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Dawn. Since you sort of stole my thunder with going to the quotes, I have to do one better. and not only go to the quotes, but play the audio. So this quote here is kind of one of my favorites. So let me just hit play on the audio.
I have said time and again, there's no place in this earth to which I would not travel. There is no chore I would not undertake if I had any faintest hope that by so doing I would promote the general cause of world peace.
Wow.
Bravo, Samantha. Bravo.
I'm glad you got me off.
I'm glad you found that.
All right.
Okay, back to you, Joy.
Thank you. I'll pick up with upcoming programs. Thursday, August 26th at noon Central, we are pleased to have Carol Robertson Lopez with Sister Cities International as our guest for the Lunch and Learn program. We will learn more about this organization's history and how it impacts the people-to-people programs around the world. Then we will have our next book club chat on Tuesday, September 14th at 7 p.m. Central. Our next book selection is Divided Highways, Building the Interstate System, Transforming American Life by Tom Lewis. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. Have a great evening, and we will see you at our next program.